Okay, good evening, everyone. Mayor Ted Betancourt, and we are here to review our budget. A scheduled budget meeting today is May 21st, 2024, and we are starting our meeting tonight at 7:07 p.m. at our regular location at the Higgins Middle School. We also have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night beginning at 6:30, and potentially more meetings to be scheduled as well. I'll just open with some comments, then turn over to our superintendent to start the review. Yes. Before we begin, we need to, if we could have everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. And as always, our meeting tonight is being broadcast live on Peabody TV, and the minutes from tonight's meeting are being recorded by our recording secretary, Laura Bowe. Just some initial comments, and certainly every budget is a challenge. Every budget presents some frustrations and opportunities, but more frustrations, it seems, lately. And just to kind of give everybody an understanding of where I'm at, before Dr. Vidal and I even really got to look at our budget, there were a number of increases that we were hit with right off the bat that are typical, but these were much more than in past years. First was health insurance. This year, health insurance went up across the board. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield, went up 9.95%. That's by far the biggest health insurance increase that I've ever dealt with. That, to give you some understanding of the number, it's about a $1.6 million increase to the budget right off the bat. And to give you a sense of what the tax impact on that is, that's about $65 to $70 tax increase just on health insurance. Last year was 7%, and that was a significant increase over years past. This year, 9.95%. Again, pretty startling, and obviously impacts when we start to look at things. Two other increases this year that were significant, that were non-discretionary. Those are just, again, bills that we get that we have to pay. There's no negotiating. There's no ability to kind of get a sense of what we're looking at until we get the bill or until we get the notice from the company. The next one is our Essex Tech Vocational School. That has gone up every year, but it hasn't been to the degree it did this year. This year, the Essex Tech bill went up $700,000, over $700,000. Again, that's non-discretionary. We just get a number from the Essex Tech Board, and then it's deducted from the number of Chapter 70 money that comes to the city. So $700,000 plus increase right there. Retirement, again, non-discretionary. We get a bill every year from our retirement authority, and that went up over $500,000 on those three items. One item that did go up significantly, and it's always the biggest budget driver, is salaries. Those were negotiated, certainly negotiated by me, Dr. Vidala, and our team. But with the 3% increases that were across the board, as well as some steps and lanes increases, our salary line went up $5 million approximately, both school and city side. So just to kind of give you some sense of it, between those four items, and there's others that go up every year, but those four big items, we're looking at $8 million right then and there. But the big problem that happened this year is that our state aid numbers did not match what has happened in years past. So every year we get state aid, which is two items primarily, Chapter 70 for education, then what's called unrestricted general government aid, which is called UGA money. That comes to cities and towns for their city-side operational budget. Last year, we got a $4.6 million increase over the year before. And the year before that, it was over an $8 million increase. But last year, we got a $4.6 million increase over last year. This year, we got a $1.4 million increase over last year. So a $3.2 million reduction in the number from last year. That is pretty devastating to any operational budget. We don't have ARPA money anymore. For a few years, we were able to rely on ARPA money to fill some gaps and make some investments in our community. It's the American Rescue Plan that was provided to cities and towns to give some ability to withstand COVID and do some projects, and again, fill some holes where they may be, and make some investments where they may be needed. That money is no longer available to cities and towns. On the school side, there was the ESSER money. I'm not sure the acronym, elementary, secondary funding of some sort, similar to ARPA, but on the school side. Emergency relief on the school side. Yep. Emergency relief. Again, because of COVID, cities and towns, their school systems were given what's called ESSER money, and we no longer have that available. So in a lot of ways, it was a perfect storm that has come together this year, where our state aid increase went down over $3 million. We no longer have ARPA money to help us out. We no longer have ESSER money to help us out. And then we had the biggest health insurance increase that we've ever had as a city, at least that I'm aware of, and other bills went up higher than expected. So that's put a little bit more pressure and created more frustration on our end. I've been meeting regularly with the police, fire, DPS, our library, all of our city departments to try to make some tough decisions and work through some difficult numbers. And I know Dr. Vidal has been meeting with his team, his administrative, his staff, principals, teachers, everybody, to try to figure out how we can make this work and eliminate as much as we can some of the progress that we've made over the years, because I know we've been able to make some real good progress. But this year is a concern to me. The tax impact is pretty hard hitting, and that's where we're going to have to try to make some difficult decisions here. So I'll open that up, turn it over to Dr. Vidala. I expect we'll get into things quite a bit today, look at some items tomorrow as well. Our public hearing right now is scheduled for next Tuesday, which would be May 28th, probably at 6 p.m. or somewhere around there, right here at the library. So we get some work to do in order to get everything ready for the public hearing. We'll also, at that time, following a vote, we will turn that over to the City Council. It has to be filed with the City Council by June 6th for there to be the public hearing on the City Council side, which right now is scheduled for the June 18th and June 20th. So with that, Dr. Vidal, I know it's been difficult for you and your team, but I'll turn it over to you for your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't usually do this, but I'd like to just take a couple minutes to provide some context. And I've had quite a bit of time over the past week to reflect back on where we've been and how we got here. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We see a lot of support out there, and we appreciate you, and we definitely want to let everyone know how much we appreciate you and how much we support you. At the end of the day, a budget is really a value document. It's a statement to our community about what we value. And that budget is really boiled down to one number, and that number is made up of two items: Chapter 70 funding, which is our money from the state, and the municipal contribution, which is our money from the city. I think back to 5 years ago, where we were pre-pandemic. We had a $77 million budget, $21 million from Chapter 70, $56 million from the city, and 880 staff members were in that appropriated budget. When I came on, we were struggling. The pandemic had hit, and we were working on a budget with a lot of unknowns. Our schools are very different than they were 5 years ago, and I think that we made some decisions along the way that I think are good decisions, and I'd like to see those remain. In 2020, our elementary teachers had 4 preps a week, even though the contract stated they should have 5. The first thing we did with the ESSER money in 2020 was hire library paras to make sure that as we came back from the pandemic, our teachers had the support that they need and the collaboration that they needed. We also made sure that we put the kindergarten paras into that ESSER funding so that we could save their jobs. That's been everything that we've done over the past 5 years. We've used that ESSER funding to build capacity, to support our staff, to infuse technology into our classrooms. Our elementary schools had little to no technology in 2020. Now every room has a Promethean board. Our kids have one-to-one laptops. They have Chromebooks they take home. We've done so much for our kids, and I think that we need to make sure that we continue to do that. We continue to support our students. We've been fortunate that the Student Opportunity Act has been a big increase of state funding for us. This year we're going to get $37 million compared to 2020 when we had $21 million. The remainder of our budget needs to come from the municipal contribution. And at the end of the day, I want to continue the work that we've done. The mayor mentioned that we've had the collective bargaining agreements. We made a healthy investment in our staff, and it's paid off. The culture is great this year. We've had an incredible amount of professional development, and we've gotten some new curriculum along the way, and I really think that we're in a great place to move forward and to do right by our students and to do right by our staff. So I'm urging everyone to find a way to fund this budget. We put everything together. The process was great this year. The principals came in and they presented to the school committee this year for the first time in many years, and their asks were reasonable. Their asks were what we need to support our kids. That came up with a big number, $98 million, a little over 98.7 actually. And our big budget drivers of health insurance, out-of-district transportation, and out-of-district tuitions are up $2.5 million, and that was in that that $98 million budget. Last week we came together and we said we need to reduce the budget. We need to reduce the budget, but we need to do it in a way that does not cut people. We're going to cut things, we're going to tighten our belts, we're going to find other funding sources. And we successfully cut $2.5 million to get to a budget of $96 million with an ask of the city of $59 million. If we can't fund this budget, this is a good budget, and I know that we need to make more cuts, more reductions. If we can't fund this budget, I ask that we go to what the state has put out as the minimum contribution, which would be a $58 million commitment from the city and $37 million from Chapter 70. If you fund us with the minimum, we can save everybody's job, we can make sure that we support our teachers, and we continue the great work that we're doing. So I'm hoping that we can get to a number tonight or tomorrow, definitely by next week, where we can support a great budget that continues the work that we're doing, that supports the wonderful teachers that we have, and we've had these amazing elected officials who have supported every step of the way, all the great things that we've done. And, you know, I just want to make sure that we're able to continue to do that, and I know that we have a tremendous amount of support around this table. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vidala. Just a couple items in response to that. The minimum contribution from the city factors in a number of things. The city of Peabody, on the city side, I just want to make sure is known, pays for all the the school nurses, all of their equipment, all of their needs comes directly from the city side. It has nothing to do with this budget. That is very rare. Most school districts, the nurses are paid through the school budget. But we, for some reason, over the years, that certainly something I inherited. It's always been on the city side, and that's a significant budget. The second would be a few years ago, we moved our facilities department, our custodians, our maintenance was moved over to the city side. So the city pays for that budget, which is 10 maintenance people, 30 plus custodians that go right from the city side of the budget. I think most school budgets would have the custodians within their own budget, but we take that responsibility on the city side. And then the third is the debt service, and I think most cities and towns pay for debt service, but the debt service is made up of the New Higgins Middle School, which I and all of us fought very hard for, which has been tremendous for our city and for our students, our educators. The new center school, or new Welch School, which I call a brand new school. It is a rehab addition, but to me it's a brand new school. And of course now we're fighting for the new high school, which will really set up our city very well. So all of that debt is paid through the city side. And again, I think most cities and towns pay for it that way. But I did want to point that out because in terms of the budget number, this budget here, the $98 million, does not include school nurses and does not include custodians and other administrative positions that would be on the city side, on the school side. There's been no unreasonable requests made. All the requests that came in from the principals and their teams were solid. I think all of us want to try to help, want to try to make those investments when we can. But this is a budget that we can't make those investments in right now. Hopefully there's some supplemental or there's something in the future that can help us as the school year goes on. But right now, unfortunately, this is one of those budgets, like everybody has their budget at their homes. If things work out well and you have a little extra money, you can make investments or do repairs or do things you need to do. Unfortunately, this is a budget that we have to tighten our belt a little bit and make some difficult decisions. And what's important to me, and I know you've been working on it, Dr. Vidala, I know you have some items you're going to bring forward today. I don't want anybody who currently has a job to lose a job. And that's extremely important, I know, to all of us. Everybody who's been an employee for the city needs to remain an employee of the city. And, maybe there's some opportunities through attrition that positions are no longer being filled, through retirements or whatnot, that we can look at closely. But I want to make sure, and I think all of us, I speak for all of us when I say at least from my point of view, we want to make sure that nobody loses their job and that there's a position for everybody. And I know, as I said, that's been a focus for you. You've spoken about that, and I know you're doing it. So none of us really want to be in this position. I feel like a lot has been thrown at us, and again, I feel like it's been a perfect storm in a lot of ways. There's a lot of factors taking place in our state and across the nation, and I feel like that's trickled down into city and town budgets. And I know, being with my colleagues, talking to my colleagues across the state, Peabody's not alone. I think if you look in the local papers, there's a number of communities having to make some difficult decisions, and I think a lot of others are going to have to make more difficult decisions than we're going to have to ultimately make. But we're going to have to make a couple of tough calls. So, let's turn it over to you.
Chip, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so last week we used a process where we sort of went through each item and talked a little bit about that. I do have prepared for the committee 8 line items here that we can discuss that do save people's jobs. They do reduce the number of positions that we have, but no one in this would lose a job in this top proposal. I do know that we have some people in the audience, so if any members want to say any, I gave a little speech in the beginning. If any members want to do that, I'd be happy to defer to them, or we can go through these items either one by one or collectively and then get into the discussion on that. All right, so it might make sense for me just to kind of give an overview. There are 11 FTEs here, and this was very difficult. Last week we went through things and we trimmed 3 administrators and moved some people into some other funding sources, reduced some non-salary items, and got down $2.5 million. I tried to do everything I could in the first round of cuts or reductions to get to this 96 number, to really not impact teachers and paras. The next round, though, unfortunately, we do have to identify some positions that are open or could result in someone sliding into a position as being displaced. So the items are, I worked with the principals on this. This year at the Brown School, we have 2 first-grade classrooms. We are proposing to do 3 classrooms next year. We would look to reduce back down to 2, and then if there's a displacement there, work with the staff around in a similar process that we've done in the past to make sure that the people there who are impacted all have positions that they can select and that they can choose that are open. The next line here is at the Carroll School. We could reduce an ELL teacher, a counselor, and a reading teacher. One of those positions is a new position that's unfilled. 2 of those positions will be vacated from people who are either on leave of absence or who are moving out of state, and so we would not fill those positions, but they would not affect current employees. At the center school, we had $150,000 for the move and supplies. We just got the budget number for the estimate for the move, and it was less than we thought, so we could reduce that line by $50,000. At the South School, with their changing demographics, some of the students are moving into middle school. We could reduce 1 full-time para and move that employee to an open position in the district. That person would not lose their position. We were looking to expand our co-teaching at the Higgins Middle School up to 8th grade and add 2 teachers. Those are not currently filled by anybody. We could cut those 2 positions, save $140,000. Also at the high school, we were looking to bring in an additional EL teacher, a business teacher to support the addition of the innovation pathway. We would still have the innovation pathway, but we'd have less elective offerings if we reduce the business teacher. And there are currently 3 math openings at the high school. Looking at the class numbers, Principal Randall thinks that they could go down to 2, fill 2 positions and just be able to absorb some of the classes and reduce a math teacher because they're hiring. There's been a lot of discussion about our virtual programming. I certainly believe in it. Our numbers at the elementary school are low. We could go to a 6 to 12 model instead of a 3 to 12 model, reduce by 1 teacher and allow that staff member to take on another position. And then we could reduce health insurance by about $69,000 based on some of these positions, and that would bring us to that net school number on the DESE website of $95,325,813. So I'll pause there. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, but the idea of these positions would be, again, to tighten our belt, not make sure that no one loses their job. It is an impact to what we do and how we service kids, but the most important thing if we need to reduce the budget is to save people's jobs and to make sure that they all have a place to be.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Vidala. Let's open it up for a discussion. Mr. Hockman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Vidal. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit, and then we'll pause, and anyone wants to talk about anything else. But I make a motion that we reduce the center school supply moving line by $50,000.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Amico. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Amico.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Are you still at the floor, or should we open it up?
Doesn't matter to me.
We'll open it up. Any comments or questions at this time? Mrs. Carpenter?
In the current enrollment, I believe it's 11 students. So I think we have 1 3rd grader. It might be in this budget, actually, if I go to the prep line. Current enrollment, there would be 1 3rd grader, 4 4th graders, and 5 5th graders. So 10. One option would be to have them return to school. We could look at a 5 to 8 middle school option, and 5 of the kids would be able to remain in a remote if the middle school teacher were able to cover 4 grades instead of 3. That's a lot to ask. They would either come back in person or they would have to look elsewhere for other virtual options. I believe it's about $9,000 per student that we get billed next year for.
Thank you. And I did want to mention we have a full committee today. Mr. Swanson is not in the room. However, he is available and listening in on through remotely. So, Mr. Swanson, when you want to jump in with questions, just hit that hand raise button and we'll bring you in, okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Amico?
Great, thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Vidala, on to what Ms. Carpenter had mentioned. Of those 11 students, any of them on virtual because of a medical condition?
I don't have that information about them yet, but we could do a little research. And you know, that's something, if we want to table that position and look at a different position, I can come back tomorrow with a new recommendation if the committee would like that.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Any other questions, Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, while we're, I guess, on the subject of the prep, homeschooling is an option too, at no cost to the district or to the pupil potentially, right? There's homeschool groups throughout the city, and this curriculum gets approved by the superintendent's office. So that's certainly a possibility if somebody has a need to not attend public school in one of our buildings. I'd like to look at the other option. What if we eliminate the prep? What does that look like in terms of, you have a cost, I can't see so well anymore, but you had a cost savings of approximately $649,055 if we don't fund the prep. I believe that staff members at the prep, teachers or senior members, and they bump somewhere, hopefully into a spot where there might be some attrition. What does that look like for us without the prep?
So the budgeted line is $649,000. That's their salaries. If they bump other people, it would be closer to $400,000. But again, I know we did a cost analysis of what it might cost the district with the impact of a large scale like that. And so, I mean, I think that's a possibility that we have below the line with the scenarios. If it's the will of the committee, if we table the prep discussion and maybe go through the other ones in the tier 3, at least we could try to come to some consensus on those line items, and then we can get further down, if that's all right with the committee.
I prefer to just continue along the line if I may. So the cost savings that you're estimating at $431,709 with low in or high out, the delta between the salaries, does that include insurance for people that may be reduced, one, and does that include the administrator?
The 649 does. The 430 assumes the 70,000 from the previous teacher above, 4 teachers times 70,000 of the lowest open position that we have, and the administrator position.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Anybody else? This time, Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. The Brown School reduced grade 2 by 1. What would the, so it was going to be 3 grade 2? What would the class sizes be if it's 2 grade 2s?
23.
It's going to be 23. Thank you, I'll yield.
Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. Has that number changed? Because my budget book shows 56 projected enrolling.
Yes, some of those students are in small group classes, and they would not be in the homerooms.
Okay, but do they count towards contractual obligation? No. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Miko?
Thank you, to the committee, and thank you, through the chair to Mr. Hockman, thank you for bringing up the prep. I would not be supporting cutting the prep, and I got some thinking this weekend. Ironically, one of the reasons why we're in this state here is because many factors, and I listed a bunch of things that are going on in the state. Where there are shortfalls in tax revenue coming in, which ultimately impact us. And one of the items I have here is the commercial real estate, and the office real estate in Boston, which has taken a severe hit since COVID because people are home virtually working. And I find it ironic that we would be thinking about eliminating a school, essentially, that is operating in the same way that some of these people are from home who refuse to go into the office and essentially have decimated the office real estate tax rolls that are coming into the state and a lot of the small businesses along those offices. So personally, I would not want to cut that position, and that's something that is going to be with us for a few years. That's very concerning to me, and it should be concerning to every elected official, that there are a lot of those offices in downtown Boston which generate usually billions of dollars and are not doing that. It's going to impact us for many years to come. So I can't, through the chair, respectfully, I can't support cutting that program.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. This is difficult, right? We haven't done this in a couple of years. This takes me back to days when we were sitting in the conference room with the Kylie with a VHS video camera, where we had some really tough budgets in the beginning of this mayor's tenure and prior to that. And none of us, first of all, before I even say that, I'd like to say thank you to our guests that are here tonight. We have some building principals, we have some department heads, we have some teachers and some paraprofessionals and some staff members. Thank you for being here tonight. Some of you have reached out. Some of you are here today to support your colleagues and yourself and to support us. We all know that this isn't easy, and nobody relishes this. But thank you for being here, and thank you for your kind words as at least I entered the room tonight. I'm just going to throw out my 2 cents because we're early in this, and we'll see how much we get through tonight. I'm sure we'll need more information, and tomorrow may be enough, may not. We'll figure that out. I'm not, respectfully to the mayor and to the administration, I'm not going to be bound by a public meeting next Tuesday. We have work to do. We have important work to do. We have work that's going to affect people's livelihoods. We have work that's going to affect the children in our district. My biggest concern as a school committee member is the students in our district. I know my colleagues on the school committee share that. I've talked to some principals today, and they echo that. I'm sure every teacher in this district also has the same feelings. Every paraprofessional, everyone that's in front of our kids every day. So respectfully, if we can't meet May 28th deadline, I would ask the city council to yield and hope that they would. If we can meet that deadline, then that's fine. But I can't be bound. I won't be bound to that. What I'm looking at in terms of reductions that are being proposed last week and today, last week we're taking some risks, some calculated risks, not all of which I'm comfortable with, but I understand it, right? I mean, if we're gonna, and perhaps with a hope that there's some supplemental funding coming down the line that offsets some of those risks and supports some of the real expenses that we have. Now we're looking at services to kids. And Doc, I respectfully, I know this isn't easy for you. I'm not laying into you. I'm not laying into anybody else at the city side or on the school side. I know this is hard work and it's hard decisions. I do have to say that there are some items here that I may be able to support, holding my nose, but I may be able to support, but I don't see any administrators. And it's got to be something that we consider. And that's not to devalue what administrators do, because they're an important part of our school district and they're an important part of providing services to kids and supporting staff members and meeting DESE obligations, and I get that. But I at least have to have what some of those options look like at some point, and if that comes tomorrow, that's fine. If that comes at a later meeting, that's fine. If that comes with a rebuttal saying that that's a ridiculous idea, we'll disagree and we'll talk about it, you know, like we do with everything on this committee. We have a great committee. We have a great committee. It hasn't always been a great committee, for me at least. We have a great committee that cares about kids, care about teachers, care about staff. We have a great team of administrators that do a fantastic job. But I can't in good conscience just look at 100 additional kids going to the Carroll School, for example, from the center, because we're refurbishing that building and I think we're losing a reading specialist, or not funding a reading specialist. They're already strained. Our special education director is here with us tonight, and thank you for being here. I'm sure, if the handcuffs got taken off, she could tell you about all of her staff that's already overworked. We all know that they are. Our teachers, are putting in tremendous effort for our kids, and we don't want to make any of these cuts. But if we're going to consider making reductions for people that touch our kids physically every day, you know what I mean, in front of them every day, teaching them whether it's a new language or getting them to grade level reading or the emotional, wellness of our kids. I think that pain would need to be shared. And so that's me and my soapbox for the beginning of this conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Oh, sorry, if I may, sorry, through the chair. Thank you. And I agree with you. And that's why last week we reduced 3 administrative positions. We were able to reduce this budget. Next year's budget will have 3 less administrators than it does this budget. I don't want to cut teachers. I'd love to vote this $96 million budget right now and we can all go home. But I know that's not a possibility. My main goal in any further reductions is to ensure that people save their jobs. Right now, we were able to reduce 3 administrators. That's the total number. That's 5% of our administrative staff next year. And any further ones, people will lose their job. These 11 positions, no one's going to lose their job. And I think that's where my priority is right now, and that's what I'll be advocating for. And I'm happy to support the committee and whatever the committee's will is.
Thank you, Dr. Vidal. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Doc. And I'm looking at last week's budget suggestions for reductions, and I see, and I don't see those administrators. So
Is
maybe
it
you
the team chairperson?
yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's a Unit B position.
yeah.
We also reduced an elementary assistant principal and an elementary principal in this budget.
Okay, so and I wasn't able to be at last Tuesday's meeting, and I respect the work that the committee did and that you did in preparing this, but I don't know how, and I wasn't here for, I don't know the conversation that took place. I don't know how we were able to eliminate or reduce an IET chair with the caseloads that we all know that they have. I just don't know how that work gets done. With regard to the principal and the assistant principal, I guess in the sense we're fortunate in that we're mothballing a building so that it can get repaired. So that works out for us. But I don't view that as a reduction.
If they were, I mean, we're fortunate with attrition because if they were still here, we would not be advocating for that. We'd be advocating for a second elementary assistant principal in our biggest building, and we do co-principals in one building because our job is to do everything we can, or my obligation at least is do everything we can to save people's jobs. So eliminating 3 administrators is not easy, but we were able to do that, and we did that before the teachers, and unfortunately, we're at the situation where we're told we need to cut another, this cuts another $1 million, and we're told we may need to cut after that. I don't want to cut any of it, but as I said, these are positions that save people's jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Through you to Dr. Vidala. Thank you for explaining that focus. And it's one that I agree with too. We don't want to see people lose their jobs. But I think the bigger issue that we're trying to make people understand is not so much that we're here to preserve jobs. We're not. We're here to make sure that children are being educated. But we're trying to preserve a very well-trained staff who are all working in the same direction. We finally have coordination from K to 12 with curriculum, with the social emotional needs for our students, where our staff have been trained on that. So honestly, in one respect it is, yes, we want to preserve people's jobs, but we're trying to preserve what we have right now. And if people have to move, at least they are people who have been working with us all along, and have benefited from the training that we're providing and the guidance that we're providing our staff on the direction we want to go. That's the harder part of taking people out of the equation. And I want the public to understand that too, because people are going to say, oh, you didn't want anyone to lose their job. No, I wouldn't want anyone to lose their job. But the bigger issue is I don't want to lose the training and the drive and ability of our staff that we have worked so hard to build. There are so many people and so many initiatives that we now have with our district. I don't want to lose it. We finally have things in here now that we fought for 20 years to get. We're just starting to see the benefit of that, because it takes 3 to 5 years to realize the benefit of those trainings and decisions that we've made. To have to see any of that disappear, that's the killer. That's the hard part. If we can shift people, shift programs, do what we can to preserve. Understand what I'm saying? I want to make sure that we're still able to provide what we were working towards. If I may, can I make another comment?
Much more eloquent than me. We've worked on building capacity, and I
Thank
think
you.
that's what we want to preserve. So thank you.
That's the word I couldn't think of. Now, I'm going to use an example. Peabody Prep. I'll tell you right now, I don't want to cut that at all. And the reason is because we have all sat in this room and gone on and on about what a wonderful program it was, how innovative it was, how we're leading the state. And we've all realized the benefit of that by capturing students who would have become statistics of dropouts, who probably would have had a lot of problems if they couldn't attend school on a daily basis for whatever their personal reasons are. We've given people an option to stay in our schools, to be able to learn our program, and to be able to benefit from that. And I don't even want to cut the elementary school either, because each person, and we've heard them, each person has their reasons for going to that program. They're all very valid reasons, and they were the reason we created the prep in the first place. It came from COVID. It came from people trying to be able to attend school with illnesses at their own home or home situations. I won't go any further. There's something that we're talking about cutting that we're already well known. That's innovative. People want to come here, and the state's trying to stop us because they don't want competition. And yeah, I'll just say it what it is. That program serves a need, and it's something everybody worked hard for. I don't want to see that cut. There's a whole bunch of things I don't want to see cut, but that's another one. If we go through line by line, a lot of these changes are going to be very difficult. I'm still hopeful that the legislature is going to come through with some funding, but to touch on what Mr. Amico said, he's right. Taxes are down. The state needs to step up. They need to honor their commitments to us on funding for transportation and special education. Every year we go in and advocate for that funding, and every year it happens to be cut or shortchanged. And I know we have a deadline, but I'm still hopeful. They haven't cut us off yet. It's coming. There's a lot of pressure at the state level to improve the Chapter 70 funding. But anyway, that's just some of what I want to say. I'll hold off on the rest 5 minutes, and somebody else can talk, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn, through the chair of the committee. As I'm looking at these reductions, and I feel as though we have already lost, even though some of these positions are not filled. We know these elementary schools so well. The Brown School, could they use a second grade teacher, absolutely. The Carroll School, I mean, think about it, they have over 600 students. Most of them, or a large group of them, are ELL or first generation. I couldn't think of a school that couldn't use an ELL teacher more than they could. And to go with that, a counselor, you have all these new students to our area. You can't have enough counselors, and to go with that, the number one thing that they need to do is read. So we'd be, you know, so I go right down the line, and I get it. Some of those positions aren't filled. They should be filled. We should have those positions filled. You know, we need to start getting back. Shame on us, shame on this state. We need to get back to basics. Students are number one, teachers are 1A. I'm sorry if I offend anyone. That's how it has to be. You know, we're going grocery shopping. We don't have the luxury of having a credit card or a line of credit. We're buying a house. We don't have the luxury of having a mortgage here. We can only spend what we have. Unless the state wants to hand out some cash, this is all we have. And I have to stand firm that we need to find other solutions here. But shame on us, shame on the state that we're in this position right now.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. I'll put in my 2 cents. Thank you, Dr. Vidala, for all your hard work and your team. You know, over the coming days, I think we're going to have some sleepless nights, because at the end of the day, every single thing that one of my colleagues has brought up, you know, I agree with. But here's, you know, it's a two-pronged process. We can spend, and I'm not criticizing anybody, but we can spend a lot of time advocating for certain positions and certain departments. But we need to figure out the other side. And, you know, Dr. Vidala came up with some suggestions. Now the real challenge is going to be us to either accept what he has proposed, or if, you know, we want to, and I'm just using it as an example, if we want to keep the prep, where's that $400,000 going to come out of? You know, where is it? What are we going to do? And that is the big challenge that we have. Nobody wants to see that go. I'm just using that as an example. But hopefully, as the week progresses, it's okay, we accept this line item, or we accept, you know, this proposed reduction, but where is it, where's the other side of it? There's got to be it's a two-sided entry to, you know, use an accounting term. So if we vote unanimously to keep the prep, for instance, where is that $400,000 coming out of? And that is going to be the hard part, along with trying to keep jobs. So, you know, we have a tough task ahead of us, and I challenge myself that in this coming week, anything that I propose, we need to have the other side of it as well. I mean, this is the first night, and we're just kind of opening remarks types of things, but as we get into this, as the week progresses, I mean, it's not going to help us any if 4 or 5 of us agree to keep a line item, but we don't have a solution. Where's that money coming from? Whatever it might be. So I would just, you know, I challenge myself, I would challenge my colleagues to keep that in mind. We can disagree with some of Dr. Vidal's suggestions, but the flip side is, well, what do you suggest then? So, you know, that's the challenge that we're going to have in the coming nights. And
Mr. Olympio, just to be clear, the scenarios at the bottom don't sum to a number. There are a bunch of different scenarios that are all super painful, and they don't add up to a number. They're just different options. The top gets to a number, but it doesn't get us to the number that the mayor has asked us to get to just yet. The top all sums to a number, and that gets us to, for example, the 95 million. Mm-hmm. The bottom is just a bunch of options, almost more of a menu. But if we eliminate something from the top, we would have to add a different.
Right, but the target is 94 million and change, is that correct?
Yes, the initial target from
Right.
the mayor's been 94. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so, I mean, you've outlaid some suggestions, but again, anything that we eliminate, there's gonna have to be another side to it. And that's our challenge. So, yeah, Mr. Amico?
You through the chair. You know, I know we took some calculated risks last week. I'm willing to take calculated risks over positions or potential positions, if that's the case. You know, I look at scenario number 6, and I get it, health insurance is rising, and, you know, outplacement and transportation is as well, but if I'm gonna take a risk on bringing back, you know, cutting $500,000, I would rather cut $500,000 on that, roll the dice, and keep 2 or 3 of those items up top and bring some people back. I don't know how the committee feels about that, but, you know, and again, and hope that the state comes back this summer. I would hope that they have some work to do. You know, I was prepared at the beginning of this. I have a whole list of things that aren't right now, and, you know, I'm ready to take a calculated risk on a scenario, if that means I can bring back, or we can bring back, just take the Carroll School, for example. If we can, you know, by having those 3 positions not at the Carroll School, that school, which is probably one of our most high-need school, is not fully functional. So I would rather risk $500,000 on healthcare, transportation, and put bodies in front of kids. Go from there. I'll yield.
Okay. Mrs. Dunn?
I agree.
I'll make a motion to cut that scenario 6 calculated risks in health insurance, OOD, and transportation. And I'll do it for $500,000.
Second.
Just on the motion, I mean, that's certainly an easy one to go to, but I think the risk is on the fact that it's tied to those positions. You know, so I certainly understand why we would go to that, but the risk is not really a risk. It's not sustainable if the positions are not in play here. I mean, that's why it's kind of on the second tier, because it's an easy one to go to, but it's really tied to the fact that you can only take risks on health insurance if there's people. It has to be tied to bodies.
Right, and I'll just add, I know that there are some districts in the newspapers these days that have overspent their budgets, and it's because they took calculated risks. I think the biggest difference that I might say is that if we take a calculated risk like that, it won't be a surprise to you. Mr. Rippon will have monthly or quarterly reports for us, and we'll know exactly where we're trending. But that scenario at the bottom likely would result in us asking the city council for another appropriation.
Mr. Hockman on the motion?
Yeah, can I invite Mr. Rippon up to explain this to us?
Thank you. I would say this, to get to that 96,191,890, which is where we're starting from tonight, you know, we've taken reductions in all those areas from where we started, which was the 98,698,400. In out-of-district tuition and in transfer, in all 3 of those areas. At this point, my comfort level isn't great, and I understand these are very difficult choices. But when I spoke to Superintendent Vidala, and he agrees, but it's more likely than not. You know, I like to call these cuts, I mean, it's phantom cuts in that it's not real. I mean, it's real the budget's lower, but don't kid yourself. Whatever of these three areas we target for additional reduction, it's very likely, all things being equal, our budget would be in deficit. And I certainly don't want to manage a budget that's in deficit. You know, Josh is right. We do budget projections. I mean, we already have problems this year. The reason I'm fairly confident, and I owe you a third quarter projection, is because, you know, I pushed, and I want to give credit to Shannon Crompton and her people. We received extraordinary relief to the tune of $1.5 million, and we need every penny of it. And so that solves this year, but I really don't want to put us all in a position because that isn't coming again for 25. And so I'm going on record saying I'm really uncomfortable. You'll do what you want, you'll do what you need to do, and I'll document that in writing that I'm uncomfortable, so nobody's surprised when we have to go to the city council, and more than likely, whatever we're putting out here, we're going to be asking for later in the fiscal year, absent some additional money through state intervention.
You, just to add to that, Mr. Rippon, so what we do, I'm sure Dr. Vidala and Sam do the same, Mr. Rippon do the same thing, but we always include the salary plus $25,000 in health insurance. I would be certainly okay with the risk on that number or on this motion if there were positions tied to it. 11 positions, whether they be teachers, administrators, whatever that would be, if it's 11 positions, then I would be very comfortable or more comfortable going with the reduction in the 500 or whatever the number.
Some of it, right.
Take a little bit of risk on each of those three items. But to do it now without really making a reduction in FTEs, I think that's just, we would be back here very soon, I think. Mr. Hockman? Still on the motion.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm not quite sure that my comment's germane to the motion. I'll ask it, and you can decide whether. Have we considered offering staff an incentive not to take insurance, and what that would look like in terms of cost savings for benefits?
I think that already exists to some extent. I could defer to Mr. Farrell, yeah, but that is an option. Not many take it, but some do.
We've had it on the city side as well, and very few people have taken that.
Well, then, on the motion, respectfully, Mr. Amico, I know where you're coming from, and I'm not here yet. This is a huge risk for me that I'm just not here yet. I think we have a lot of work to do before we get here. We may wind up back here. I'm not saying we're not, but 8:05 on the first real, the first significant budget meeting, it's a little premature for me.
I'll just say, if we were to eliminate 11 FTEs and go to, and then we could take on those risks, I don't think we're very far from completing this budget. We have a motion on the floor. Roll call vote. Oh, Mr. Miko.
Thank you, through the chair, on that motion. And again, my calculated risk on that is not to bring it in front of the city council in, next year. My calculated risk is hoping that the state increases some kind of emergency funding at some point. Again, it's a shot in the dark, but there's a lot going on in the state right now. There are a lot of issues that are taking part of our educational pie, our formula, And, you know, we have a shortcoming of we got 4.6 a couple of years ago. And what was I'm sorry, through the chair, Mr. Mayor, what was the number this year that we were
So
short?
it was a $4.6 million increase the year before. This year was 1.4.
So we're looking at over a $3 million shortfall there. I'm just thinking there's a shot in the dark that, you know, the state comes back and says, oh, you know, by the way, you have this, this, and that, maybe we can help out. Again, it's probably not going to happen, but my risk wasn't intended to put pressure on the city council or us. It's intended to put it where it belongs in the state, since we had the shortfall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. I understand. Mr. Hockman?
We're going to take a roll call. I'll fully explain my vote because there's risks here also associated with out-of-district placement for special education that I'm horribly not comfortable with, and transportation, which I assume is for out-of-district special education. So they're kind of tied together. I will say, and I appreciate the mayor's comments, you know, if we accept the superintendent's suggestions and this risk, we're pretty close to the number. I'm not very comfortable with most of the superintendent's suggestions, which leaves me as uncomfortable as I am with this vote, or being just knowing I'm not able to support this vote at this time. There are a lot of other places that I'd like to explore before I'm gonna, you know, Mr. Miko brought up the Carroll School. Not only is it 600 plus kids, 630 kids this year, but we're sending, I think, 100 kids from the center school over there. And then on top of that, we're going to tell them potentially, you know, there's the possibility, at least with the document in front of us, that they're not going to have an additional ELL teacher. And I would want to know the number of those 100 kids that are going from the center school that require ELL services. They're not going to have a reading specialist. I want to know what the number of kids out of that 100 are below grade level reading that are going to require a reading specialist, and a counselor. I assume that's a school adjustment counselor. Yeah, I'm in that building weekly. It's stressed just by numbers, and when I talk about administrators, you know, I look at that building's going to have 730 or 700 plus kids.
630. That's a projection.
That's projection. Okay.
Yeah, this year is
I see,
549.
549. Yeah.
Projection is 630.
Yeah.
We originally had budgeted for three reading teachers and I think 7 ELL teachers. So we'd be looking to reduce to 2 and 6.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, it's not ideal. You know, but these are things that we worked with the EL director and the principal, special ed director. You know, we worked on all of these things. Like I said, they're painful cuts and they're not easy, but we're going into these eyes wide open. We've had our conversations with the team, and this is the best that we could do.
No, Doc. This isn't a condemnation on you or a reflection on you. It's our role. This is our function. This is our role to go through these, and I think I need to go through some of them to understand these more. You know, I said earlier about, you know, and it's one of the things that's not before me for consideration, well, or not on the sheet, but everything is before us for consideration, is, you know, I look at that Carroll School with one principal, one assistant principal, and 630 kids, and I have the Higgins with 1,345 kids, and I think we have 4 assistant principals and 1 principal. You know, those are some of the things that I'd like to explore, because I think that there are needs within buildings that may not be met with the budget that we're going to potentially put forward. And, you know, and I'm not saying that's an easy fix for the Higgins, and it may be a position. And I don't want to cut anyone's job. Like, nobody here wants to cut someone's job. But when I look at putting a building together and what that looks like with an extra 100 kids and less 1 reading specialist, less 1 school adjustment counselor, and less 1 ELL teacher, knowing the population in that building, I just at this point I can't support that, and that's why I can't support these risks that Mr. Miko is proposing.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Anybody else, Mr. Miko? Sorry.
I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Thank
now.
you. Thank you, Mr. Miko. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Olympio.
Thank you. And just to follow up, actually, while I have, I'll get to Mr. Rippon in a second, but the the proposed tier 2 cuts, I added them up on the high end, and none of these are recommended by you. But they add up to about 3.3 million. So how I look at that is we have a shortfall from 95 to 94. It's just over $1 million. So if we don't touch any of these, cuts, then we have to, again, we have to find another $1 million in the budget somewhere. Okay, so again, it's a two-sided entry. We can all agree that we're not going to do any of these tier twos, but now we have to roll our sleeves up and say, where is that $1 million going to come from? Same with the tier one. If a majority of us say, you know what, we're going to keep the FTEs, then the challenge is going to be, again, we have to find another $1 million within the budget. So we have to think both sides. I hate to see, I don't want a long explanations on, okay, it's important that we should advocate why we want something there, but we need to, again, think about what's the other side of it. And I'll be going through the budget book, and I'm hoping on hope. A few years ago, you get lucky, you find no disrespect, maybe you find a formula mistake. It's what that kind of thing. That happened a few times. But I was looking at a couple of the lines in admin, like the unemployment compensation figure, 184,000.
Bringing that number down to
Yeah.
150 flat.
Okay.
So we trim that a little bit. If we start getting into people, that's gonna create exposure all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, right. So, but if we're not, I'm just talking out loud, if we're not laying any more people off, you're saying that 150 is about as low as you want to go.
Well, because, superintendent can speak more to it,
Yeah.
but just because this isn't unique this year, it's not unique to Peabody. There are some people that it isn't a good fit, we want the best teachers in front of our, so some teachers may not be renewed and they're eligible for unemployment. Each teacher that, if they stay the full 26, it's $26,000.
Yep.
So again, I think getting much below, that only covers 6 of them.
Yep. Okay. No, that's, I'll be looking at some of these items just to, again, make sure, you never know, through discussion, that kind of thing. I also noticed the utilities, the gas was an increase of 190,000.
Yeah, 33%, and I even double-checked with Dan Doucette, and he verified that's what the rate's going up.
Okay.
Believe me, I'd
No,
love to trim.
Again, no reflection on you, but I know how sometimes you can get your head buried in some things, and sometimes things fall through the cracks. I live it every day. Thank you.
Mr. Olympia.
I'll yield for now.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. So just echoing some things that my colleagues have said about, we have a list before us that I know you spent a lot of time with and a lot of people you worked with them. And we can all sit here and advocate why we don't want these things to be cut. What I do know is for me and for I think everybody here, one of our main goals is to keep people in front of students, to keep services in front of students. It's always keeping that service going. We don't want to cut positions, but the main focus in my mind is to keep educators, support staff in front of the students. So when I look at the reductions, you say that we're not eliminating any positions, but essentially what we are doing is eliminating people in front of our students because we're not filling that position. And I know it's difficult, and I know it's not anything we all want to do. So I still see this as a burden on the staff that's left over because they're going to have to pick up those services for the children that now don't have that extra person, which essentially isn't an extra person. They're supposed to be there. We're taking away from things that the kids should have. We're taking people away from them. And that's always been my main focus, people in front of students. So what I would ask is, earlier in the week, Mr. Swanson had requested like an organizational chart. It's more of like front office, people that aren't in front of students. I would ask if you could go back and look at that chart and see where people can consolidate in there. Rather than asking the people in front of students to consolidate, can we consolidate more on this organizational chart? Some of the things I honestly don't know what people do. I don't know what I see the description of the job. I see them tiered underneath different people. Can some of those be absorbed by, one person? My request would be, could you go back and look through this and see where we could consolidate them instead of consolidating the other way?
So on the org chart, everybody's listed. So like there's a thing that says teachers, there's 500 people, right? And so this thing that says paras is 180 people. So everybody's listed in the organizational chart. So it's just sort of a reflection of what we do. I will say that we're very lean. Like our business office is lean. Our AFSCME people are lean. It's tight. It's really tight. We want to make sure the payroll hits every 2 weeks. We want to make sure that when somebody calls the transportation office, there's someone there to pick up the phone. When someone calls the special ed office, there's someone there to pick up the phone. There's someone there to process the paperwork. Everybody in our organization is important. I met with all the department heads and all the principals, and I tell you, when I woke up on Tuesday morning last week, the number was 191, 890. I felt pretty good about it. When I tried to go to bed on Tuesday night, May 14th, the number had changed, and I haven't slept much in the past week. And I've worked with our principals and our department heads, and these are my suggestions. And as Mr. Olympio said, I make suggestions, and the committee will make decisions. But if these aren't what you want, I'm happy to listen to other solutions. I don't have many right now. These are my tightest 11 positions that I can find, and the scenarios below are even harder. But we can certainly go back and look. But it's pretty lean. This is a week's worth of work with our administrators and our teachers and our union heads, putting our heads together around, where can we spare, and these are the suggestions that came out.
My mic's not on. And I don't know what they are, but I just feel that it's still, my main focus is keeping people in front of students. And when you say this organizational chart lists paras and teachers, I'm not talking that portion of it. I'm up a little bit higher, that aren't in front of students. Still do good work, but if we're going to go this way, I'd like to look this way as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. So part of my concern about my diatribe earlier about May 28th is I don't know what the turnaround time on some of this stuff is, because I don't know that we were comfortable, giving you the list of things that we'd like you to look into, all of it tonight. I mean, we can certainly get it to you. We can meet individually or whatever, and I don't know what the turnaround time is on that. We have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. As far as I know, it's the last meeting we have scheduled before May 28th. May 27th is a federal holiday, and we have a weekend, a long weekend that I suspect we all have some plans. So I don't know what we're looking at in terms of time. If we want to go through these items that Ms. Carpenter is talking about now, I'm okay doing that, but I don't know how the committee wants to proceed moving forward. But it sounds to me, and again, respectfully, Doc, you know, we appreciate you and your team putting together the list of suggestions for us. You know, we'll see how that plays out, right? We'll see how that all comes out. But I think what I'm hearing from other committee members and myself is that there are other options that we'd like to consider and get some information about. I'm going to need that information. You know, I'm only one vote, so, you know.
And what I would ask, I know we've done some trimming already, so this number is 96, 191, 840 now, because we did take out $50,000.
Yeah.
141, look at that. Yeah, we got 140, we took out more than $50. We took out 50,000. What I would ask is, what line items do you want me to look at? And I think that would be the most helpful for me, because there are some things on the organizational chart that have already been pulled out of this budget. So any line item that you want us to explore and explain, I would be happy to do so.
So and I'm happy to proceed that way unless Ms. Carpenter wishes to take the floor back. So I see in this organizational chart, we have a director of Paso Avante and we have a director of early childhood. And I know that they're two different programs. I don't know if there's a possibility of consolidating the work for those two. I mean, they both deal with early childhood. I know, like I said, they're two different programs, but is there an opportunity for that? And some of this I'm willing to offer rhetorically, and we can talk about now.
I'm happy to respond why
Yeah.
why those positions didn't make it. I will say that both of those positions are not in this number. They're both from revenue generating positions, and we have already pulled them out. Paso Avante is self-sustaining. That program's tuitions pays for all of the people. The early childhood position, and that person will be alone in the center school annex next year. That person is not in this budget. That position is also paid from the tuitions generated from that program. So I'm trying everything, you know, I mean, I try to be as lean as possible, but both of those positions are paid out of revenue generating positions, and they're not in the appropriated budget.
Thank you, I appreciate that, but those are revenue generating opportunities that we can allocate for something else. So if I want to allocate that revenue for an IEP team chair, or at a district placement for special education or a reading specialist at the Carroll School, I want that opportunity. I understand your rationale, that it's not affecting the $96,000 number, $96 million number, but it is, right? It is, because it's a choice of how to spend the money that's being generated. And all I'm asking is it possible for one person to oversee both of those programs as opposed to two people? We're gonna realize the same revenue. It's just that a portion of the revenue that we realize can get allocated for something other than a second director. And I think that perhaps is an opportunity. I don't know, you know, I know, and I've talked to a lot of people this week about how far we've come, and Ms. Dunn, thank you for bringing it up, because we have come a long way, and we've had some opportunities to fund a proper budget with some grant money that we got from the federal government, and I wish we were in that position now, because we wouldn't be talking about any of this. But before that, we didn't have a lot of the student services in that column on the right side. We have an assistant superintendent for pupil services who's doing a fantastic job, and then he has an assistant supervisor. And I'm not suggesting that the assistant supervisor doesn't perform roles, and he or she may perform significant roles, but again, you know, we started.
Are you talking about the attendance supervisor?
No.
Supervisor of attendance?
No. There's an assistant superintendent for pupil services, and then there's a student services position, right? So I assume those are two people, two different positions. So again, 3 years ago, and I know COVID changed things, and we're still dealing with ramifications of that. And you know, if we're looking at tightening somewhere, is that something that's possible? I don't know the answer to that. I'd want to know if that's something that's possible. I see you know, data information specialists. I mean, I assume that they're gathering information from MCAS testing and, you know.
Those are the the AFSCME employees that are in central office doing registrations. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tight.
Well, if you're asking what lines I'm looking for, those would be the lines, or at least now positions that I'd want to see. I'd want to see what the Higgins looks like if we're going to consider reducing a cluster in one grade level or two grade levels, what that looks like with one less associate principal in terms of what the budget looks like for that. Again, I'm not advocating for any of these things. I just want to know what this looks like so I can make a decision on whether I'm going to take a risk that I think is going to fail, which we may ultimately do, but I don't want to do that.
Mr. Olympio?
Yeah, through the chair. Also, I think would be helpful is any positions that are funded through grants that are not part of the appropriated budget. Again, that might be some opportunity to pick up, you know, to offset some of these potential reductions. So any grants that aren't part of the appropriated budget, I like to see what are those grants, you know, who are we paying out of those grants and what their roles are and what the parameters of the grants are. I understand some grants might have parameters, but I'd like to know, you know, what do we have there? Thank you. I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Dunn?
My two colleagues just raised an issue that made me think, could we have a list of the income, the revenue that comes into the district, and see if there is any room for us to examine that? I'll give you an example. Saving on transportation. Is there any way we would be able to save money on transportation, which would be money we could dedicate to another area of the budget? We've often looked at, you know, the fees, the expenses that people pay to go to different programs and things. Can we look at that just to see, and if possible, if you could give us, gosh, Mr. Rippon, I'm sorry, but if you could tell us like what year we set the bus fee, the athletic fee, Paso Savant cost, the preschool cost. If we could see how long those costs have been in place, just so we could look at those. And it's another way of, instead of cutting positions, to bring in additional funding for the programs. And even on grants, I know, you know, we have the grants that we get for being open, the entitlement grants. But maybe there are some grants that we could apply for depending upon situations that we have in Peabody. Maybe there are grants out there that we could look at to help fund our preschool program. Maybe there's money coming for preschool that we haven't even been able to look at yet, but the initiative from the state level is to increase the opportunity for people to go to preschool. Let's see if they're going to increase funding for preschools, and if there are any requirements that we need to look at. Doing pathways at the high school is an introduction into opening Chapter 74 programs, which does have additional funding. If we're going to cut a position at the high school in the business teacher, which would have been in the realm of that pathway program, are we shooting ourselves in the foot by doing that when we need to keep that in the budget, because maybe next year that we're eligible for Chapter 74? So those are just some of the examples that I can think of off the top of my head. But if we could get a list, I think it might be helpful. It's the flip side of cuts, bring in more revenue.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. We have Mr. Swanson that would like to join in. Mr. Swanson, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Mr. Swanson, your microphone is not working.
Uh, can you hear me now?
No, can't hear. Although it does show him as being muted on the screen.
All right, sorry, Mr. Swanson, we'll try to come back to you. Any other comments? Mr.
Any
Miko?
better?
Through the chair to Dr. Vidala. Dr. Vidala, any of those positions on that first tier, hypothetically, if they were cut tonight, any possibility that those would be triggered by the contract where we would have to add a teacher if, say, a second grade class hit that magic number? And I guess my reasoning through the chair is if we just got to a number hypothetically, knowing, I mean, that's my wishing, is knowing that, say that grade 2's position at the Brown, even if we didn't fund it right now, knowing that on August 25th, you're gonna have to come before us and say, I need a second grade teacher because I have 32 students in that class.
If there were an influx of students, we saw an influx of students this year. Fortunately, that did come with funding, and we were able to fund additional positions. We could do that. You know, with the positions up top, obviously, they're the last positions that I want to cut. Again, if they're open and they haven't been funded, they haven't been filled yet, you know, and we did get additional funding, if the legislation came through and said we're going to get additional funding at 104 a kid again, you know, these would be the first ones that I would want to bring back. So if, you know, if people were comfortable with anything on this list that we could reduce with the caveat that we would bring it back if additional funding were available from the state, you know, I would be happy to bring these positions back if we got funding.
Okay, thank you. All right, I would suggest, oh, Mrs. Dunn, go ahead.
It's just a question. I was writing a note. I was going to send it to you. Could Mr. Swanson call someone's cell phone and we could put him on speakerphone on the
Sounds
cell
good.
phone
Let's do it.
up to the microphone?
Sounds good.
See,
Let's do it.
the least technologically advanced person in the room.
Mr. Swanson, call me. Call John Swanson. Hey, John, can I put you on speaker? We're having trouble hearing you, but it appears that maybe the public can, but we're not hearing you here in the library. Hold on. Can I put you on speaker? Okay. John?
Yes.
All right, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dr. Vidala. I again, obviously technical difficulties. I appreciate looking in. I apologize for not being able to hook up with you today to speak on this budget so far. But I do want to reiterate what my my committee members have also said. I think for us the focus is for the students, for the teachers, and those in front of them. I would ask that I would check it to ask that those have put in front of you already to come back with some of the review of some of the items they've looked at. But I'd also like to add, it's not an easy ask, but I'd like to ask if you could look at the impact if we reduced the prep to a high school program. We know the numbers climbing there. I think at the high school level, it's very valuable. But I'd like to see how that impacts our budget as well if we leave it at a student setting at a high school level as well. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson.
So I can respond to that last piece. It would be 2 teachers versus one teacher as proposed, and so it's a total of $140,000 reduction if we kept just the high school program.
Any other comments or questions at this time? Here's what I'm thinking. I'd like to propose that we break now, come back tomorrow at 6:30. It'll very likely be a very long session. You know, there's a real possibility we're going to have to schedule some time coming up in the next few days. I'm not tied to Mr. Hockman. I think he made a fair point in terms of the 28th. I think that was just a date we discussed internally to try to meet. But if we need to go beyond that, I'm sure the city council would work with us on that. So if need be, we can certainly do that. I want to work on some things on my end, certainly with Dr. Vidala's help and Mr. Rippon, in terms of some of those calculated risks that I really want to dig into a little bit more. And then we can continue the discussion. I think Dr. Vidala got some feedback that he and his team need to look at. I've got some on my end that I need to look at. And then I think we come back tomorrow and really dig in and see where we stand. Probably, I think we should maybe plan on a pretty lengthy session tomorrow. But I think if we dig into a couple of these things, maybe it's can make some headway over the course of the day and come back tomorrow night. Is everybody okay with that? All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll
Motion to
We'll recess.
motion to recess.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Till tomorrow
unanimous
night.
motion, a unanimous vote. Thank you.